This is great. So I'm curious, how many of you have workout equipment for your brain?
We're going to help 1 billion brains. And now BrainTap uses light, sound, and vibration. This is something the whole world needs, especially something called psychoimmunology. So we want to boost our immune system by our psychology, because fear and stress shut down the health of our body. Now we've done it with so many people. We have 2,300 clinics. We're now partners with 11 major universities, 5 in India, 4 in Brazil, 2 here in the US, and we work very closely with Duke University. We had 3 different studies published, one by the NIH Integrative Health Conferences, because we showed such a dynamic change in the nervous system with 1 session of brain tapping.
Most of us want to improve mental performance and reduce stress, especially during this time. And we all know that sometimes it's easier said than done. So I'm curious, how many of you have workout equipment for your brain? I'm really excited to introduce to you one of our amazing providers in Polish Your Life Network, our collaborating partner who is on a mission to change 1 billion brains. His invention makes stress relief easier than ever before. And it's not only stress relief, because we can talk about, and we will talk about some of these today, we can talk about anxiety, pain management, sleep, and other benefits that this equipment and invention can have. We've known each other for quite a few years. We wrote a book together to improve more lives. And recently we had a great conversation about our doctors networking group, Polish Your Life. So I'm super happy to introduce to you Dr. Patrick Porter. Dr. Porter, tell our viewers about BrainTap and how you started on your mission to change 1 billion brains.
All right. Well, my mission actually started when I was a young man, about 12 years old. My dad said, "Hey, you got a problem," and the number one equation to that problem was me, and it was my thinking. So he taught me how to meditate using a technology at that time called the Silva method, and we used something called GSR, galvanic skin response. And so I've always been fascinated with technology and how we can improve brain function. As a young man, it helped me in my schoolwork and then in sports. But then when I went to school, I first went to school for electronics, because that's my love. People go, "How did you marry technology with this kind of psychology piece?" And so I went to school first for electronics, got my degree, but then kept helping my father out. And I said, "Wow, I love doing this other thing more than electronics, but electronics is still the fun thing that I do." And so I got involved with a group called Light and Sound Research, and we invented the very first portable light and sound machine. This was way back in the 80s. And since then, we've gotten a lot of awards from the technology, but we were way ahead of our time. If you can imagine having a device like we have, but before cell phones, before CDs, no internet, no down. There was probably an internet, but we weren't using it. And now I started a franchise company that rolled that forward a little bit. In 2013, I sold that business in 2006. But then in 2013, I thought, I really want to reinvest in a technology, because the world is getting just more and more stressful. I mean, when you think about it, and I thought, we haven't really changed our technology since the 90s. I mean, we had a few evolutions there. So in 2013, I thought, what can I do? So I started doing more research. I moved to California for 9 years, worked with technology companies to help me to create the vision that I had for what's now the BrainTap. It uses light, sound, and vibration, which I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit more. But in using that, I wanted to find, how could I better a person's brain? I first set a goal for 1 million, but since we sold 3 million of my books and tapes, I thought, I got to up the ante. We're gonna help 1 billion brains. And now, Mike, what's so amazing, we have we have content, Polish content, we have German content, we have content for India, we have content for Brazil, we have content for China. I mean, just India and China alone, of course, we could get 1 billion brains, just throw a rock in any direction. But what our goal is, this is something the whole world needs, especially something called psychoimmunology. So we want to boost our immune system by our psychology, because fear and stress shut down the health of our body. But in 2013, even before that, in 2006, I was working as a consultant for chiropractors, building what is called Chiro spas. And that's where we met, because we were helping doctors put in spas for either weight loss or self-development centers inside their practices. And so we're still doing that. And we just kind of put it on overdrive, if you will, because now we've done it with so many people. We have 2,300 clinics, and we're testing it out. we're now partners with 11 major universities, 5 in India, 4 in Brazil, 2 here in the US, and we work very closely with Duke University, which in America, probably people know who Duke is. We're actually in 2 of their graduate classes here. They're using the BrainTap technology. So we're in the campus, they call it Healthy Duke, and we're teaching in these universities, we're doing experiments to find out if we can lower the stress on these campuses, and basically when we're not stressed, we make better decisions, whether that be in business or in life. And my focus has always been, hey, how can I help people better their brain, get better decisions? There's no reason that we should go to sleep all stressed out and anxious. We can do something about it. So my goal is to really communicate how technology can have a positive effect on our biology. And that's why we're here talking today.
Wow. I mean, this is such a great story, and it's one of these stories that has a big impact. So that's where my passion comes in. I want to connect you with other people so more people know about this. Because for me, it's more obvious what exactly BrainTap is and how it functions and why it functions so well. If you could give our viewers a little bit more information about the technology itself and the different factors that you are actually combining to have such a big impact.
Okay, so let me kind of pre-frame it for people. Think of your nervous system, which 70% of your nervous system's in your brain. So that's why we're focusing on the brain. And think of your brain like a switch. It's either on or off. But when it's on and functioning right, let's call that the healing brain, or what we call the thriving brain. But when you're stressed or anxious, it's like you turn off that thriving brain and you turn on a part of the brain that's basically your survivor brain. And when you have that survivor brain, most people have heard the term fight or flight or anxiety disorders, things of that nature. So there's a cascade effect that happens. So what I started doing was, how could I combine technology? So the first technology that we started using was sound. So our ears bring in 25,000 different pieces of information at any moment in time, but we're always filtering it out. If we were sitting in a restaurant and we're just talking a little bit, we're having a conversation, but somebody 3 tables down says, hey, I looked at this website, Polish Your Life. Well, your ears would pop up because even though you weren't listening for it, your brain was still hearing it. It just wasn't paying attention to it. There's a part of our brain called the default mode network that's always listening and learning. It does it through sight, sound, basically all of our senses. So what I said, how can we use that? So we're using things like binaural beats, isochronic tones, solfeggio frequencies, Noget frequencies. There's a whole lot that goes into it. Think of it like a symphony. You don't have to play the viola to enjoy the symphony, when they put together all those instruments. So we put together all of these instruments or all these different sounds. That's so they can use it. If you have a smartphone, like we all have smartphones in our pocket, you actually have a technology where you can use BrainTap just with your phone if you want, with your own earphones, because of the sound feature. Now, we've also included words. We have probably 400 sessions that are just music. So if somebody doesn't want to hear what I have to say, but what we now know, there's something called epigenetics, which we don't have time to go into it all, but our genes are not fixed in space and time. Our body is changing. In fact, 80% of who we are, in fact, Mike, when we showed up at this conversation today, 80% of that has already changed, because every 40 seconds, something called biophotons or light emitting DNA actually rebraided our DNA so we could change for each moment, every second. So it's always changing, and it's based on a lot of things like the foods we eat, the thoughts we think, the water we drink. Everything in our environment is changing. We're very adaptive. And the science to this is called frequency following response. So not only do we do it with sound and words can have a direct impact on how we change those. Science shows about 2,300 gene expressions change just by the words we either say to ourselves or others say to us. So we can use that in a very positive way. The biggest thing that we've done since the 80s is we brought light into the equation. Now, if you go out there in the science world right now, the most underprescribed nutrient on earth today is light. We are light emitting people. I mean, basically every cell has something called a mitochondria, which is let's call it the battery or the furnace of the cell, however you want to think about it. But it's absorbing light and transmitting that light as well, because we are light beings. We just, on a physical level, not just on a metaphysical level like we hear some people say, but on a physical level, that light is energy. And that energy at the mitochondria level, we can feed that with 470 nanometer light, 633 nanometer light. These are the different lights. Now, also infrared light, which we don't use on our device, but we use it in other technologies. There's a lot of different light frequencies. We've chose the ones that are safest for the brain and that we can deliver very easily. Anybody can do it from their clinics or from their home. They just put the headset on. We have something called retinal flashing. You can have your eyes open if you want. It won't hurt you. 470 nanometer light is a very small increment of light. It's very clean light. There's a lot of miscommunication about blue light. The blue light that we use is healing, healthy light. I mean, health spas across the world use it to help manage collagen in the face, get rid of wrinkles. That's not the reason we're using it, but you know, they use it for beauty. We also use light in the ears, which we might talk about a little bit later. But that light, part of what happens in our body absorbs light. It then, the hemoglobin, I should say, absorbs the light, stores it like a battery, circulates through the body, and it finds a cell that's about to die. They call this apoptosis in science. That cell then attracts that photon. That photon then restarts that cell, or the Krebs cycle of that cell, and brings back life. It creates nitric oxide, vasodilation, blood flow. That's important because as we get better looking and more intelligent with age, something happens to our brain, right? The biggest fear in the world is not public speaking anymore. The biggest fear in the world is that we're going to age and we're not going to remember who we were. We're going to work our whole life, get to the end of our life, and somebody's going to have to take care of us because we don't know who we are. We don't have the memories. But the reality is, if we think about our ancient cultures, everywhere in the world, they didn't keep the history of their tribe with the young people that had the better brains. They kept it with the elders because this is a new phenomenon. Actually, it's new since the 1930s and 40s. There has never been dementia in the world like there is today. That would happen occasionally. It's kind of like what happens with autism. That would be an occasional thing that happened. Now, 1 in 43 kids have autism. Now, you know, we all know, they say that 1 out of 3 people know somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's. Well, I can tell you right now, we don't have time to go through the science, but we're working with Seminole University right now because we did a pilot study where we showed that in 6 weeks, we could get 49% more neuroplasticity with people 55, 65 who already were diagnosed with dementia. But they can't take the diagnosis away because medical science doesn't have a solution for it. But that doesn't mean we can't get rid of the symptoms. So light does that. Sound does that. So light, sound, and vibration are the keys to this. This science is called frequency following response. What I did, there's a lot of different ways to use this. What I did is I always had a mission, even from the 80s. I wanted to have a low-cost solution that everyone can have in their home. The kids can use it for their schoolwork, sports. The parents can use it for their health and healing. They can use it in their business world. You know, there's also, we have over 1,300 different applications. So because I've been in this field for so long, and people like yourself might come, oh, I have a great idea, you know, and then we'll put it out to a doctor's network or something like that. So we have a lot to share with the world, and we're always updating. Right now, as we speak, we actually have 11 different studies going on at the university level that we were just published this year, even during the COVID experience. We had 3 different studies published, one by the NIH Integrative Health Conferences, because we showed such a dynamic change in the nervous system with 1 session of brain tapping.
This is so great that you mentioned it, because some of these things I know already. Some of it I didn't know about the most recent study. So I'm learning with our viewers right now, but I want people to know that there are more options and more technologies like this that are just changing people's lives. And the excuse that this is what I have and that's it is no longer a valid excuse in most cases, because there are always options. So this, I'm like really passionate about it. I'm passionate about the fact that you are using so many different factors. People have no idea when I talk to them about, or most people I should say, when I talk about psychoneuroimmunology, when I talk about synesthesia and how environment controls the genes, or more, maybe not necessarily the genes, but the expression of the genes and how our body actually responds to what's happening in the environment, and then decides to kind of like use the genes, which is kind of like, I understand, like a map that we can use or not use. So our environment, and Bruce Lipton talks about it a lot, our environment has such a big role. So if that's the case, and you are able to control the environment through different senses through which we are perceiving the environment, to me, this is power. And the fact that you are using light and talking about light, I mean, let's look at us even now we are recording this for our viewers who are watching maybe a little bit later. We are recording at the time of the pandemic. Many people were closed in their homes. Many people got afraid, maybe anxious, and when they're locked down, and I am making sure that I take breaks, but right now I'm in my home office, which is a basement. So how much real helpful healing light do I really have if I didn't take breaks? And many people just underestimate, like you mentioned, the most underprescribed nutrient is light, and who thinks about it? So thank you so much for sharing at least bits and pieces of your amazing technology here. You mentioned something about sleep, and that is something I would like to touch on for sure. So we all know that we need to recharge our batteries. We need sleep, and it's such a big problem because some people really struggle with this. And it's no longer like, hey, I couldn't sleep last night. I'm talking about affecting all areas of life, from work to our sexual life to our mental performance. Everything can get affected if we chronically cannot sleep. And I meet a lot of people like that who are looking for a solution and can't find something that is going to be effective. We know it's not just the hours, because sometimes we have the hours and we will even fall asleep, but we don't wake up recharged, right? So what are some of your tips, Dr. Porter, to improve the quality of sleep, and also what role BrainTap can possibly have in people's lives?
Yeah. So when you think about sleep, a lot of people think it's time in bed, and that's not true at all. It's time in deep sleep. So we say you need at least an hour of deep sleep and 2.5 hours of REM sleep. Now, we can measure that because of smart watches or devices we put beside our bed, things of that nature, like the BioStrap or something like that, or the ring, the Oura Ring. So what we want to do is think of your brain like a gear shifter. You know, in the old days, we had a standard gear shift where we had to do the clutch and gas, and we'd shift gears, and there might be 5 gears. Well, our brain has 5 different brain states, okay? When we sleep, that deep sleep we're talking about is deep delta. That's the deepest sleep. But a lot of people are still up there in, let's say, second gear or first gear, just moving along, burning out, getting their beta brain going. That's the wide awake brain, that what we call the survivor brain. And they don't, instead of it being a smooth shift from being awake to sleep, they don't know how to make that jump. There's a lot of reasons for that. But what BrainTap does is it's going to train the brain to move smoothly between these brain states. Instead of it being like a standard transmission, we want the brain to work more like an automatic. You know, when we need to downshift and relax, just to give you an idea, these bodies haven't really evolved for hundreds of thousands of years. You know, these are the same bodies, you know, that they go back in time and say, hey, they really haven't changed that much. We've introduced a lot of technology to these bodies, but the bodies themselves haven't changed. And so what happened was, we used to get, like, let's say we come on a saber-toothed tiger, or we get chased by a dinosaur, or whatever it is, but we make it back to the cave and we talk to our buddies about it. That would happen maybe 4 or 5 times a week. Today, that's happening 4 or 5 times before breakfast, you know, especially if you look at your cell phones and things of that nature. You get a text or you get an email, something triggers you. So what's happening is the brain becomes habituated to a negative behavior. We actually get addicted to stress. And as bizarre as that sounds, not that we want to be addicted to it, but the brain says, hey, this is the way your life is. So it actually wakes people up stressed instead of relaxed. So there's a few things we want you to do. Of course, we'd love you to BrainTap. That's one thing to train the brain. But the other thing is, at night, you should start turning off your lights. We are chemically coded to the light from our sun. Now, again, back in the ancient times, when we didn't have homes and lights and all that, the average person 100 years ago slept 12 hours a day. What were they going to do? There's the expression, I'm going to burn a candle at both ends. Nobody did that because candles were expensive, you know, so you didn't stay up, you know, you didn't stay up watching the candle. Well, we'll stay up watching television till 12, 2 o'clock at night or whatever. And there's a lot of science that shows if you don't get to bed before 12 o'clock at night, actually they say 10 o'clock is best, but if you don't get to bed by 12 o'clock, your brain never turns on the melatonin production, which is think of melatonin like the brain cleanser. It cleans the brain. If we don't turn it on, the brain doesn't get clean. So what we recommend is start turning down the lights before you go to bed. In your bedroom, it should be as dark as you can make it, because that tells the body, this is time to recoup. This is time to rest, relax, digest, and heal. And so we go through that cycle. I don't recommend using alarm clocks. I'm very fortunate I haven't used an alarm clock since I was a kid, because my dad taught me to wake up with my mind. You have a 100 billion neural bit processor. It can do incredible things for us. We have to train it though. So even if I do set an alarm, which occasionally I will, like when I'm traveling and I have to get up at 4 in the morning or something like that, but I always wake up 5 or 10 minutes before that alarm. Because if you wake up to the alarm, that immediately spikes cortisol. And you immediately have that fight or flight, and that's not the way to start your day. You know, we've all heard the expression, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. We want to wake up, you know, there are alarms out there. If you need to use an alarm, there's alarms out there that actually light up the room, like the sun. You can buy them, and so the sun, it's almost like the sun rises in your room, and you wake up because of that. And there's also ones that use gentle tone. So you have to find out, are you more visual, you are more auditory? That will set the tone for the day. And I guarantee you, if you're not doing that, your stress level is going to go way down. The other thing is you should have a sleep ritual, which means what do you do an hour before sleep? Now, a lot of our BrainTap users obviously do BrainTap because they want to sleep. 95% of our users use it right before bed because they want to, when they're using it at home, because they want to have that deep, restful sleep because they want to offload that stress. But even if you're not doing that, you should set aside time to read, hopefully not with the, you know, you can use the night screens if you're using a tablet or whatever, because the blue light on your computer and on your tablets and your phone is dirty blue light. It's not the healing light that we're talking about. Because what do? When you look at the BrainTap, it has 8 LEDs. When you look at a computer screen, it has 1,048 times whatever, 780. Basically, you're talking about about 100,000 LEDs. So magnify the BrainTap by 100,000. That's when you're looking at your cell phone. So there's not a lot of light with the BrainTap. You don't really need a lot. The other is some people find that taking a bath, you know, a warm bath before they go to bed. But when you get in bed, what we find is if you learn how to meditate, which we're going to teach you to do with the BrainTap, is you can use some of the techniques just on your own. A lot of it has to do with breathing, you know, and breathing is a key. So if you don't know a lot about breathing and no one can teach you, just go on the internet and look up Wim Hof breathing or something. He's a little crazy, but you'll find that it changes your physiology. Now with BrainTap, for those that have used it, I'm teaching you how to breathe. I'm always reminding you to breathe because believe it or not, and for those watching, don't tell people you're doing this, but watch people. So many people hold their breath during conversations. They're just, because you're talking to them, most people don't realize that people breathe. When you breathe, they breathe. So as long as you're talking, they don't breathe. That's why saying things in short bits, letting people breathe, short bits. When you're with somebody personally, one-on-one, you can tell a lot more. But people get anxious. You know, if you're one of those people that does that. Also, no news in the evening. If you get your news, I always tell people, get your news before 6 o'clock at night, preferably not before you eat either. You know, a lot of people, I grew up Catholic, so we always said a prayer before dinner. We still, you know, kind of pray over our food. I do this not just because it's good to pray, but it's also preparing my body to digest the food. So especially your dinner meal, you should relax, do something to calm down your nervous system before you eat, and then discontinue all eating 3 to 4 hours before sleep. You'll find if you do a few of those things, you're going to have the deepest sleep possible. You know, in one of our sleep studies we're doing right now in Australia, we're doing it with a coal mining company, and we have 30 people. We just started that study, but we're very excited. The pilot study was phenomenal. So we have study going on there. We also have with the police officers here in St. Louis, we're doing a sleep study with them, but actually it's a PTSD study because they're getting, you know, unfortunately these guys, that's a very thankless job right now. You know, we only want police when we're in trouble. We don't want to see them when we're speeding, you know, something like that. So they have a lot of stress. So I think the biggest thing we can do for them is give them tools. So we're doing this research to show that, hey, this is a very stressful job. Now let's bring that stress down. At night, if we can disengage from that stress, no work, no talk about taxes. My wife has a policy at our house because I'm kind of, you know, this has been my life forever, but I love talking about it. She says, after 9 o'clock, no work. You know, and so, you know, we can't talk about it because, you know, of course, being all over the country and the world, people will call me at all hours, you know, because they're in California, it's only 6 o'clock, you know, but on the East Coast of the United States, it's 9 o'clock. So we had to put a cutoff there. So make rules. Also, during the day, you should block out times for you, just like you said you do. You take breaks. You should block those out on your schedule to do what we call wellness breaks. Do something to break up the stress of the day that's not a synthetic, food or beverage. It's something you do naturally. I like to say, let's engage the electrical system, not the biological system, as much as possible.
Wow. I mean, these were value bombs, seriously, for people who are really trying to improve the quality of sleep. You gave so many of them. I wanted to kind of like recap, but it's really a lot of them. So one is having healthy habits before sleep. And that's also, you mentioned before meals. Very interestingly, I noticed that many cultures, not only Catholics, we talk about praying before meals. We talk about different spiritual habits before meals in many cultures. And I was recently thinking about it. We have different periods of time where we either our body needs to switch to that maybe parasympathetic nervous system performance to either heal, detoxify, maybe digest. And it's not a coincidence that you would have that spiritual moment right before meal, that you would also kind of like have a special habit for going to sleep. But many of us, and frankly, I'm guilty of that myself sometimes, because I'm just so busy that sometimes I'm tempted to look at my social media feed, to look at what's happening. And then I'm stimulating my brain, not always with the information I want. Not having news, I'm very good at that because I don't like to follow negative news, and it's very hard to find positive news. You mentioned the light, be careful of the dirty blue light, which is in our cell phones. Also making sure that we don't talk about business. All these things are so important. And of course, using BrainTap as one of the tools that we can have to slow down our brain waves and gradually, like you said, on autopilot switch. That just all sounds perfect. So thank you for bringing it up. For people who don't know how, because it may sound a little complicated, how you feel as a BrainTap, let's call it user, or a patient in a clinic where BrainTap is, or if you use it at home, you actually feel at the beginning you're trying to control all that because you have a lot of stimulants. You have the light in the ears, you have the light on your eyelids, you also have music and sounds, and on top of that, you are trying to relax and follow all the things that you are telling us to do. But at the same time, you mention it in most of your programs, you don't have to consciously try to follow all these impulses and stimulants. All you do as a user, this is brilliant. You just relax and you don't worry about that and let BrainTap do the work. It's hard to explain it to somebody until you try it, but it's not as difficult as it sounds. You have multiple stimulants, but your job as a user is you just put it on and you try to relax and you focus on just following the voice. It's amazing. I would really wanted to touch on something that is very important to me because this is our mission in Polish Your Life, and this is a specific problem that we solve, and that is many people go to a doctor's office because there is a problem. Then they get recommendations and they actually follow those recommendations. And if they follow recommendations, sometimes they actually do not feel better. And it can be very frustrating because many of us are in that situation. Many of us know a person who is in that situation. So what we want to do as Polish Your Life Network, as our doctors networking group, we want to give people options and tell them what they can do. What options do you have? And sometimes it's collaboration between different providers. That's why we invite them here, and that's why we connect them, encourage to collaborate. Sometimes people just need to give it a little bit more time. Maybe they think they're following recommendations, but not exactly, because they are not. So sometimes going back to the doctor and evaluating and having an honest conversation. But sometimes people forget that they also play a very important role in their own healing. And there are things they can do themselves to help improve the quality of their life. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about BrainTap in that context. What can BrainTap do not only on the provider, but also on the patient's side of this conversation?
Well, for providers like the clinics that I was talking about, the 2,000 plus clinics, they actually offer this as a service at the end of the treatments typically. Because let's say you're taking the world's greatest supplements, but you're stressed out. Unfortunately, you're going to eliminate those all out. Because as you said, the parasympathetic system wasn't engaged. The sympathetic system was. That's that fight or flight, that survivor brain. So number one, they might be doing everything right. But if the number one cause of all illness, stress, isn't dealt with, all that other stuff isn't going to work. Now, also pain. When we're talking about pain, if we can reduce or eliminate pain naturally, they don't have to take a pill to do that, then we know that the brain tapping system back in the MC Square days, the first light and sound machine, we were actually engaged to train people in biofeedback for pain control. Pain only happens in your wide awake brain state called beta. So if we can get you out of beta and into that alpha and theta, that's that state between being awake and asleep, that what most people consider the meditative state, your body is not going to produce as much pain, because pain is only, again, pain is only available to you to recognize when you're awake. So if we can get more of those other brain waves, your brain happens to be the most powerful pharmacy on earth. With a simple thought, we can release 30,000 different neurochemicals. So that means that when you start to release the brain, in fact, one of the studies we're doing in Brazil right now, which we're very excited about, it's a 2-year study. They're actually over in GIMS, which is the Government Institute of Medical Science in India. They're doing a mirror study. They took BrainTap and they're calling it a digital drug. Now, there's no drugs involved, but what happens is we know that we trigger neurotropics, which is your brain's natural neurological system, through what's called neurotransmitters. So if we can get you to more alpha, for instance, we can create acetylcholine. If we get more theta, we get more gamma. So, or GABA. So in those things, and those are only just 2 of them, there's a lot more that happen, but in the process of that, what BrainTap does, and the reason we're with a lot of neuroclinics around the world, and you know, I do a lot with a group called IAFNR or the Carrick Institute, a Neuro Life Center in Georgia with the chiropractors, Parker College, is because after these doctors are done doing their neuro work, there's something called Hebb's Law. If people aren't aware of it, Hebb's Law states those neurons that fire together wire together. Those neurons that tend to fire apart tend to stay apart. So we want to get, let's say the doctor did all this great work, physical therapy, chiropractic, or even neurocare, whatever they're doing. Now afterwards, they can do a brain tapping session. Now their brain is going to become more neuroplastic around it, because just because it happened once during therapy doesn't mean that brain's going to remember it. You know, there's something called fractal dynamics that happens, which is basically when you do something once, your brain thinks, wow, that could be an accident. You do something twice, wow, that could be a coincidence. But as soon as you do something 3 times, your brain has to create a neurocircuit for it. To give an example, Mike, because I know you also speak Polish, you have a place in your brain that's still active because you speak 2 languages. Maybe you speak more than that, because a lot of Europeans speak more than 1 language. Our science officer, for instance, his name is Francisco Sidral. He speaks 6 languages fluently. He went to India with me. By the end of that trip, it was a 2-week trip, he was speaking Hindi. And, you know, just blew me away. In my brain, though, because I only learned 1 language, at the age of 7, my brain said, you know what, we don't need that circuit anymore, because the brain's always looking to shut down and use less energy. It shut down that circuit. If you learn 2 languages, the brain says, wait a minute, this could happen again. We need to keep that active. But now that's a positive thing, right? Let's say we have negative thoughts that happen or negative experiences that happen. Now the brain keeps those negative programs going. So we have to keep work. We have to maintenance our mind. And I think the way you said at the very beginning was excellent. When you said, how many people have exercise equipment for their brain? We don't. Nobody's taught. Most of us are taught what to think. That's why you probably don't tune into political like me. I mean, I consider myself an American, not a political person. But in the process, they're telling us what to think all the time. We want to teach people how to think. How do you think about your life? How do you think about your health? How do you think about your business? How do you improve that thinking process? So what we do in the clinical level is we start to make people, just jokingly, kind of tongue in cheek, I say that we're a gateway drug to the self-help industry. So that means that people come to their doctor with a problem. Maybe they have pain in their back, or they got a car accident, or they have some neural conditionings, or they're starting to feel a little dementia coming on, or whatever it is, whatever brought them to their doctor, that's the problem. But once they solve it, and we can show them, wow, you have a great potential. And I believe everyone has an enormous upside. We all have this great potential. My first book was called Awaken the Genius. And the reason I came up with that title was, in Roman mythology, they have a saying that we all have talents and skills. Everybody does. And what the Romans believed was that there was a genie that kept our talents and skills. And if we use those talents and skills, we used our genie, so they considered you a genius. It wasn't that you were Einstein or Edison or Tesla. So everyone has their own genius. So my goal, when we're talking about bettering 1 billion brains, imagine 1 billion geniuses using their skills, their talents, their resources, and improving the quality of life, looking around the world going, wow, how can I make an impact today? How can I make someone's life better? How can I make the world better? Because when we all are going in the same direction, which it blows me away when I see the greed that happens out there when people are destroying our world, because who's going to clean it up? We're here, we have to do it. So I believe that if we get those billion geniuses going, we're going to have a much better world, and one that we all want to live in, one that we want our grandkids to live in, and their grandkids, and to perpetuate health and healing in the world.
Wow. Wow. Seriously, this is, I knew it's going to be a great interview, and I'm just blown away by the amount of value that you give to people. Even if you just think about self-awareness, who you are, what can you do, what role do you play, this interview is already going to be very valuable for you. I'm heavily involved in personal development. This is my passion. This is what I want to always be, a better person. And I know we all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. That's why, I mean, I put a tie today, but I know I don't look perfect, right? So in self-awareness process, many people don't realize that if there's only a tiny fraction of what's happening around us that is controlled by our conscious brain, and most of it is the subconscious, we all focus on things that we read, things that we do, and things that we actively try to change. But most of us completely ignore the subconscious part. And this is kind of bridging the gap. So I think, I mean, we don't talk about it in that context, but it's also self-awareness. Who are we? I feel like sometimes we are connected to the deeper being inside us, or the light or the energy that we represent. And BrainTap, it is a gateway to connect with something much deeper. So it's a spiritual experience on top of all the other benefits that we are talking about. It can give a lot of people hope. And I'm talking about individuals, I'm talking about providers in our network who may want to implement BrainTap in their clinics. When we talk about our top doctors that we work with, all of them care about their patients. And before they implement something in their treatment protocol, before they implement BrainTap or any other service, they want to know, how do I know if it actually works? Let's talk about research behind the technology, and let's also talk about the results that people are getting right now.
Right. There's actually a research site we put together. It's not a sales site, so they can go there and get the research. It's braintapresearch.com, where we keep people up to date. The 3 latest studies, there's a lot of research out there. All five of those different technologies I talked about that are in the headset have all been heavily researched, from light therapy to sound therapy to vibrational therapy, all those things. But what we did is now we're putting it together into one place. And the nice thing is that because we have the help of people like Duke and Seminole College and Northern Arkansas State, and the 5 colleges in Brazil, and the 4 colleges in India, we also have, one of the neat things is that we're also part of NIMHANS, which is the world's largest mental hospital in the world. It's in Bangalore, India. And we were very fortunate last time I was in India, because we did an integrative conference there. When you go to India and you start teaching Indian people how to meditate, it's kind of humbling, because you think everybody there meditates, but the problem is in India, everybody wants to be American. And everybody in America that's got any sense knows, hey, we need to slow down. We need to learn, they're doing mindfulness training. They're doing all this kind of work. So when I go over there and I can prove to them with science that what they were teaching their kids 100 years ago actually has an impact, and now we can do it faster and better and easier, these government agencies are going crazy. So at NIMHANS, they actually they see more people in a day than most of our mental hospitals in America see in a month. They're using a little differently than in America, because we have to be so careful. Are we making a claim here, a claim there? Well, in India, they just want results, because it's socialized medicine, so nobody pays for it. So there's not the greed factor there. They want help. So they're putting in rooms. Now, the nice thing is they have what's called fMRI machines, and people probably know we can do brain scans. So they're actually doing a brain scan study with us, because they're getting such phenomenal results with people, whether they're schizophrenic and other things. Now, we wouldn't do that in America, but in India, they're doing the research for us, just like they're doing the digital drug studies in Brazil and India, because we're getting such phenomenal results. They're trying to figure out, why are you getting such great results? What's going on? And the science now has got to a point, now we know we're changing brainwaves, and that's key. So one of the results that might be impactful for your doctor's group is we do a lot with autism. Now, we're not the total solution. We need a doctor that already has you have to do the other therapies too. So I'm not saying BrainTap isn't like gosh, just put this on and magic happens and they don't have to do anything else. That's just for the everyday user maybe. But when we're dealing with something like autism and we work with a speech pathologist, we speak in the brainwave of alpha, which means if we don't have a lot of alpha activity, we won't speak. So one of the symptoms of autism is they call them nonverbal. So we took one of our doctors, her name is Joquita Handy, she's in Orange County, California, and she did a research project where she said, what can we do with these kids? First of all, they said, there's no way these autistic kids are going to let you put this headset on them and relax. Well, I can tell you right now, they love it because our brain loves patterns. And so they put it on, they pass out for 10 minutes. Literally, they boom, they're gone. But after 30 days of doing that, we had a 23% improvement in alpha activity. Now, the neat thing was 6 months later, when we took that same group, they still had 23% alpha activity, which means when you train the brain, and you're talking about the epigenetic piece and what Bruce Lipton's talking about, 95% is subconscious, but our learning systems are all for that 5%. Our body is our subconscious. If we can expose our body, and we all know that if we have an experience, it makes much more impact than if we're just told something. When somebody says something to you. In fact, verbal communication is probably the worst. If you do it, if you take somebody, that's why internships and working with coaches are so important, because you have somebody there who's explaining it to you, working with you. You're not just being told what to do. So that's one thing. But we have so many different studies going on. What happens if somebody goes online, actually just puts in #BrainTap, they're going to see almost every sport out there, from professional soccer to, we just got to notice that the WNBA just did a whole big report because they're using the BrainTap in there because of COVID, working with the stress the players have. We're in the hockey teams, we're in the pro football teams, we're in the college, and that's mainly because of concussions. And that's one of the research projects we're doing. Our brain, number one, you need to sleep to get your brain working right. But also light is energy. So when we talk about photonic energy, and we are energy beings, and they call this energy medicine, because even sounds, those sounds that come in through the ears, it's converted into energy. That's why we can hear it. So we're all energy. Everything's vibrating and moving and teeming. We live in a universe of teeming energy. And so how do we use that energy to create coherence or healing states? That's where we're going now. So we're moving mostly our research when they find out, it's all about sleep first, because once you have sleep, we all know if we sleep well, it's like we got a superpower. If we didn't, it's like somebody put kryptonite in our pocket and we can't do anything. So that's number one. Number two is we've got to have something we can do consistently. Our nervous system is always adapting. So if we stop doing those things that work, obviously our brain and our body will atrophy. That's part of aging. That, everybody says, hey, I want to reverse aging. There's no such thing yet. I mean, if they do figure that out, that's great. But now what we can do is we can slow it down, right? That's why we do a lot with the biohacking community, David Asprey and people like that, because this is a biohack. Now, we didn't know that in the 80s, but basically light is a biohack. Now people, what they're saying is get outside, walk on the earth. People like a good friend of mine, Clint Oper, who might be somebody you'd want to interview. He wrote the book Earthing. He's, I think, getting out there on the earth and grounding, because a lot of people are scared of things like EMF, right? And you should be concerned about that, but not afraid, because there's always technology that can solve it. The technology is our earth itself. If you were standing next to a 5G tower, for instance, and your bare feet, that 5G would not hurt you at all. I don't care who you are, because you're grounding that energy. Our body is designed to be at a zero null point, or what they call 0 point energy. Now, zero doesn't mean no energy. Actually, 0 point energy means infinite energy. That's what they're finding. If we could tap into the energy in a grain of sand, we could power the earth for 100 years, just in a grain of sand. So there's a lot of energy out there. But the problem is our body doesn't know how to handle all these frequencies, right? Well, frequencies come as thoughts, foods, beverages, people. You know, when you meet somebody, we all have that friend that when we're around them, we feel energized and wow, we can take on the world. And that's really what our coaches, you know, the people we work with as coaches, that's what hopefully they're making us feel. But we also have that friend that we call an energy vampire, right? After we leave them, we're like, man, where'd my energy go? Now they're all energized because they stole all your energy, you know, in kind of like in the cartoon, the Bad Luck Schleprock or something like that, you know, where they're always gloom and doom and bringing the energy down. So we need to make sure we're around people that are energized. And so what we're trying to do is how can we lift up the energy? So most of our research now, when they look at us, is all about how can we raise the energy? How can we raise the vibration? You know, when you think of jobs like, unfortunately, like the military or police and things like that, those are low energy jobs. I mean, they're not running around giving people tickets because they drove correctly. You know, they're looking for the people that are doing everything bad. That's not good for our brain. So those people really need to improve the quality of their brain health because every day they're bombarded. Just like my wife, who's she's an editor. So her job, she can't even go to eat if somebody spelled something wrong on the chalkboard. She goes crazy, you know, and I'm like, I don't care. You know, I could care less because, you know, the reason I married her was she corrected my spelling. You know, that was part of, you know, one of the reasons I should say. And so, but that's a very negative view, right? Because you're always looking for problems. There are the optimistic people, and we need both. We need to have a little of both, especially in business. If you're too optimistic, you get taken down the pea patch, but you need to have that balance. So that's what we're talking about here.
This is so important. So please pay attention to this interview and keep in mind, as we are talking about different conditions, we are talking about, I mean, anything from sleeping disorders to anxiety, or maybe, I mean, we mentioned autism today. Keep in mind, we're not treating any disease. We're not making any kind of promises, but giving people options, giving people information about technologies. Try it out. Even talk to your doctor. Should I try that kind of equipment? Find a collaborating partner and a clinic who is close to you. We can find somebody within our Polish Your Life network who is going to be close to where you live, so you can maybe come in and try. You want to try it yourself, we can give you a link. I'm going to post a link so you can just try the app, maybe without the headset, but at least experience a part of it. So just want to make it like a little disclaimer here, being respectful to our laws and regulations. We are not promising anything, just sharing information because it's powerful. It can really improve people's lives. So share this video, share this information, share Dr. Patrick Porter's work, because there is a much deeper meaning than just recording a video for you. Again, I'm going to post a link so you can get more information about BrainTap. Follow Dr. Patrick Porter because he's just amazing. And as I'm seeing, like just recently we reconnected because I saw something on social media about you and Dave Asprey that I deeply admire. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so awesome. It's such a great moment to collaborate, because you know, sometimes we get so busy that not only months, but in our case, it was years that passed. And I'm like, okay, let's reconnect. If you have any questions to Dr. Porter, please comment below. We're going to be replying to questions. You can contact him directly. I'll be happy to make an introduction as well. And remember what we do here at Polish Your Life. Remember about our mission to improve lives. So subscribe or follow, depending on which platform you're watching it on. It's going to help us improve 1 million lives, we say, but right now I'm thinking with Dr. Porter's mission of 1 billion geniuses, maybe we should change it to 1 billion. Dr. Porter, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for watching as well.
Well, thank you, Mike.